The Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 18, verses 15 through 20 in the New Testament. Jesus offers practical advice to his disciples on how individuals and the church as a whole should go about restoring relationships when one member has sinned against another. The reading begins at verse 15. Jesus said to the disciples, "If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them." The Gospel of the Lord.
Never be surprised by what the human is capable of doing. That was a quote from one of my professors when I was in seminary. I don't think I will ever forget it. Dan was a pastor, a psychologist, and a professor. He served as a chaplain in the Navy during the Vietnam War. I found him to be incredibly interesting in a brilliantly quirky kind of way. His area of expertise was in counseling and pastoral care, and I had him in class towards the end of his career. One of the insights that came from seeing just about everything during his years of experience, working with people in all manner of settings, was this phrase: don't be surprised by what the human is capable of doing. Now, unfortunately, the context for this quote was not in the sense of, don't be surprised by all the wonderful things humans will do for each other, although there are many examples of that. No, instead, the context was about not being surprised by the many and various ways we end up hurting one another. For me, that little nugget of wisdom has been important because it helps name one aspect about being human, specifically that we all hurt each other, whether that is emotionally, verbally, or physically. You have, and you will, hurt people that you really care about, and even those that you don't even know, just as others will inevitably hurt you. Sometimes the hurt we inflict on others is unintentional, a careless comment, an accident, an innocent insult. And sometimes the hurt we cause is carried out with careful precision, designed to inflict the most damage possible. Humans hurt each other. And what Dan wanted to prepare us for was not to be caught off guard when members of your community, when members of your church, or members of your family, or even leaders in your country and community, people that you respect and love, people who look good and have things put together, end up doing something just downright awful. He wanted us not to get caught off guard by this, because when it happens, and it will, not only will the person who is harmed need care, but also the one who perpetrated the harm. And if you are half prepared for it, if you half expect it, then you are in a really good position to be present to all those involved. And so he said, never be surprised by what the human is capable of doing. Jesus knows that we hurt each other. He has had many run-ins with both his disciples and with the religious community as a whole. In fact, in last week's reading, Jesus used the phrase, "Get behind me, Satan," to one of his disciples and closest friends. Oh, that is harsh, and I'm sure Peter did not take it well. How could he? Similarly, Jesus has been the target of many insults, complaints, and criticisms by others. I don't care who you are, that does not feel good and does nothing to foster positive, healthy relationships. As human beings, we are really quite talented at hurting other human beings. So what do you do when that happens? I'm not really talking about the small things where you just need an hour by yourself to cool down, or maybe a simple apology to resolve the issue. No, I'm talking about the bigger issues. I'm talking about a messy divorce. I'm talking about when someone picks on your kid. I'm talking about when someone mocks a value that is central to your whole being. I'm talking about when someone harms you, or vice versa, when you go out of your way to get back at someone else. Where does this end? Where does it lead? And what do you do? I have an extreme example. Again, when I was in seminary, I met an international student named John. It was easy to notice John coming towards you in a crowd because he walked with a considerable limp. Also, I should mention that he was from Rwanda. Do you know your history? Do you know what happened in Rwanda between April and July in 1994? Upwards of 1 million people were exterminated in a massive genocide. John told me a story about what it was like to experience this firsthand, of what it was like when you become less than human in the eyes of another. He told me what it was like when neighbors turn against neighbors and families hold their dead children in their arms. He told me about what it's like when religious leaders help perpetrate violence. He told me what it was like when the world as you know it comes to an end. In many ways, his story reminds me of the stories of refugees who live in the St. Cloud area. Now, my professor tried to prepare me for this. He told me, Chad, never be surprised by what the human is capable of doing. Again, how does one move forward? How in the world can you find life in the midst of the hurt that you have experienced or the anger that you hold toward another? The church is many things, but what it is not is perfect. It drives me nuts when someone says, oh, well, I don't go to church anymore because it's full of people who think they are good but really aren't any better than the rest of us. Well, of course they're not. The church is not about being perfect or pretending to be perfect for that matter. The church is not about a community attaining a level of holiness that outshines the rest of the world. No. Instead, one of the central aspects of the church is that we are a community that works at reconciliation when we hurt each other and those in our world. Reconciliation is naming the harm we have caused and asking for forgiveness. Reconciliation is about restoring a relationship. It's about bringing life back from the dead. Reconciliation is not able to do this by requiring people to forget the wrong that they have experienced or by renaming something that is bad as something that is good. Reconciliation is not tolerating abuse. No. Reconciliation is able to give you life because at its core, it taps into God's love, mercy, and grace. Asking for forgiveness when you don't deserve it, and in turn giving it, is what love is. It's what grace is, and that can only come from God. Do you want to know what that looks like at the extreme? It looks like this: Portraits of Reconciliation. In a nutshell, this is a photojournal about reconciliation that has occurred 20 years after the conflict in Rwanda. There are stories and pictures of those who were imprisoned for war crimes and genocide that were released and actually reconciled with their victims. In other words, these are stories about people moving to a place of forgiveness and love with their enemy. It's crazy. It's powerful. It's the only way forward when you live in a world where part of what it means to be human is that we will hurt each other in large and in small ways. In the gospel today, Jesus is instructing his disciples in this matter. And so he gives them advice, not to be confused with a surefire 3-step plan, but advice on how to be intentional, to do everything possible to restore the relationship with your neighbor. Because God cares about your neighbor. God cares about your relationships and your well-being. God cares about your life. And even when it does not work and people walk away, when a relationship cannot be restored, Jesus says, treat them like a tax collector or Gentile, which for Jesus' ministry meant treat them still with love and compassion. Now, I am not pretending that any of this is easy or even makes sense in a world that is all about getting even and exerting power. But just as Dan told me never to be surprised about what the human is capable of doing, Jesus tells us never to be surprised by the length of God's love and the life that it can bring. So I don't know where you are in life right now. I don't know what you have buried and left for dead, that thing in the dark gone forever so that any kind of light or new life would be completely unexpected. But you know what those things are. Those times, places, and people which you have used the words, our relationship is over. I will never let myself feel that way about another person again. Or, I can't believe in this whole God thing anymore with all the suffering out there. Or, that time of happiness will never return. Or, I can never forgive. I can never let this go. It's too bad. It's too big. I'm too tired and I'm too angry. But having a God of the resurrection, having a God of reconciliation, means that the story is seldom over when we think it is. New life is possible. We can have our own portraits of reconciliation because God's grace and love has the power to address the great divides in our world and in our life. That is the gospel lesson that we hear today. That is the good news for us. Thanks be to God for that. Amen.